Welcome back to Going Pro. This is episode 4, where we're going to talk about the idea that pros love goals. You'll never hear a pro talk about goals as being unhelpful, or you'll never hear someone say, well, I'm just not goal-oriented. Pros know that all behavior is motivated. All behavior. If you're behaving in the world, there's a motive behind it. Something's driving that, and motives drive towards something, and that's the goal. So we just know that everybody has goals. Everybody is goal-oriented, and they're behaving in the world in a way that's trying to get somewhere or trying to avoid something, which of course is another kind of goal. I want this or I don't want that to happen, and therefore I'm going to orient my behavior around those things. Professional business people just know that, and then they know how to use that psychological and biological mechanisms that exist within the human to get positive growth outcomes. Now, you might not like your goals. You might not like the behavior you're doing. You might think it's wrong or that there are things you shouldn't do, but you'd start by knowing you have goals. And if you don't know what they are, all you have to do is look at your results. What results are you producing in the world? And then work backwards, and you'll find the goals and the motive that's driving that. In fact, I would suggest that you need to do that in order to make any kind of changes or adjustments to the outcomes you're producing. You have to understand that everyone has goals, and if you're behaving in the world, you're behaving from a motive towards a goal. Pros understand that, and they know how to use it to make changes in their lives and go after positive growth for themselves and their teams. To be able to use those mechanisms well for positive growth, you have to understand what the mechanisms are. And there are 3 types of motives. The first one is biological motive. There's a motivation to behave in the world that is driven by our biology. We are part of the animal kingdom, after all. And we may not want to admit it, but that drives a lot of what we do in the world. The second one is external motives. There are things that drive us that are external to us. And then the third is internal motivation, or what we call intrinsic motivation. The difference between external motivation and intrinsic motivation in leadership is actually really dramatic and important to understand. And pros are figuring out how to use these 2 different mechanisms, when to use them and why to use them, what they're for and what they're not for. External motivation has been around forever. We have been using it for a very long time to motivate behavior, and it has gotten connected to what it means to lead. External motivations are simply punishment and reward systems. We've been using punishment and reward systems to lead and drive behavior in our teams for as long as there's been leaders. In the last few generations, the notion of intrinsic motivation as a mode of leadership has begun to emerge, and we are learning how to use it. It is incredibly powerful and necessary in the emerging economy. As the nature of work is changing, it is increasingly important to understand intrinsic motivation and how that works in us and those we lead. Because when work is simple and repetitive, which lots of work used to be only simple. In fact, I would say most work was simple and repetitive. And when it's simple and repetitive, we think external motivation is appropriate. It actually gets the job done. Because humans kind of don't want to do simple and repetitive work, but we will, so we use external motivations to do that, punishment and reward systems. Internal motivation or intrinsic motivation is something that emanates from within us, where the task, or we could say the reward for doing the task, is the task itself. And increasingly, that is what's driving what we do in work, because that is the appropriate motivation when work is complex and requires creativity and innovation. We now know that when work is complex and requires creativity and innovation, external motivations not only don't work, they hurt the work. The quality of the work goes down. The effectiveness of the work goes down. But if you can use intrinsic motivation, it actually helps people get that kind of work done. A lot more to say about that, but pros understand the difference between external and internal motivations and when to use which ones. Pros understand that when you set goals and you establish things that you want to accomplish, you do not make it easy. You make it worth it. And there's a big difference between easy and worth it. There's no adventure worth going on that is easy. Adventures are hard. They're difficult. They're just worth it. And the difference between punishment and sacrifice is motive. And that motive is oriented towards goals, towards that which you want to accomplish. Pros know there's no easy button. And they know when they're setting goals, they're not designing something that will be easy. They're actually designing something that will be hard, but worth it. And those kind of goals create motion. We like to say meaning and hard are linked. Hard and meaning could be, but not necessarily. Not everything that is hard creates meaning, but everything that is meaningful will be hard, because meaning and easy are strangers. There's no easy button in life. And pros know when you're setting goals, you're not trying to create something that will make it easy. You're trying to create something or go on an adventure that will be worth it. Pros get concrete and specific with their goals. They write goals that are aggressive but still realistic. And they write goals that are measurable. Goals where you can say, did I do it, yes or no? And they write those things down. And they write down big goals that will pull them into the future. And then they write down small goals that will move them in that direction. They measure and evaluate their progress, and they adjust as necessary. Because pros know that there are no bullseyes in life. When you establish a goal, you're creating a target. Think of an archer's target. You're creating a target and you're walking it in your mind out into some distant field. And in that field is a barn, and you put it on the side of the barn. There's the target. And you know it's a target because it has a bullseye on it. And a lot of people will say, well, I can't even hit the broad side of a barn. And I'm like, great. Can you hit the field that the barn is in that has the target on it? Because if you can get going in that direction and hit that field out there, that's going to feel like a huge win. You're not going to hit the bullseye. There's no bullseyes in life. Nobody's hitting bullseyes unless you're doing one of two things. Some people are drawing targets around whatever they hit. That's the ready, fire, aim methodology. And people do that, and then they claim they hit a bullseye. But no, they didn't. Or as they go through their journey, they're moving the target all the time. And then finally they're standing just a little bit away from it and they hit that bullseye. Okay, fine. That's a revised goal. And yeah, maybe you hit the bullseye, but that target is not in the same place it started. And that's the difference. Most of us need to actually say, what is it we want, even though we don't know how to do it, and place that idea out in some distant field. And then start going that direction. And along the way, all kinds of things are going to happen. You're going to miss deadlines. You're not going to get enough customers. The revenue won't be there when you thought it was going to be there. The product won't be ready when you thought it was going to be ready. The content's not good enough. It's all fine because you're moving in that direction. And along the way, you learn. You learn from all these things that you're doing in the world. And then you're able to hit the field. Pros know how to do that. So, pros set goals. They write them down and they go for it. And in doing so, they're able to pull intrinsic motivation out of themselves, recognize the journey will be hard, count the cost, and go anyway. Because there's no adventure worth going on that doesn't include hardship and cost, and sometimes even suffering. They just know it's worth it.